Well, welcome back to The Heat. We're talking about Germany's role in today's Europe. Is it becoming too dominant, or is it a positive driving force in the European Union? Thanks to our guests again. Stelios, I'm going to get back to something that you talked about earlier on, and that who's getting, let's say, an advantage out of these negotiations of what has been imposed on Greece. I mean, what are the political implications in Greece for these austerity measures that have been imposed on the country? You warned about the far right getting a big advantage out of this. Are they getting a lot of benefits out of this?
Yes. I mean, if you are talking about the extreme right, yes, they are now. They're in their honeymoon, I would say, because they're saying, well, this is what happened with the democratic elected government. They are continue to impose the same austerity as the previous governments. So the only solution is us, and. So the other, from the very beginning, after the elections, the idea was exactly to humiliate and overthrow the left government. Not for the ideological reasons, but for the other countries of Europe, where there was a danger of, let's say, non-establishment leftist parties to go in power, to take the lesson, to learn the lesson. That was the case with Podemos in Spain, Portugal, Sinn Féin in Ireland, and so on. And the idea was to completely humiliate the government, to make it completely surrender into the eyes of the European opinion, just for nobody, no government dares, no country dares, no voters dare in any country of the Eurozone to vote against the dogma imposed by the Berlin, and whether it's not, it makes no sense, because if you see what the main the Nobel laureates of the economy, Stiglitz, Krugman, name them all, they say this policy is crazy. It makes no sense. No, it makes sense. It makes sense because the German government is taking profit of that. They are profiting. They are earning billions and billions of euros by keeping the crisis in a controlled way, of course. Right. By the interest rates and by the low value of the euro. But this is not. It's not a union. It's not a family of European nations. It's the old story. That's why I'm saying the history is repeating itself.
Yeah, and I mean, some tough words there, Greece being humiliated, that Germany is sticking to its dogma. How concerned is Germany about stability in Europe? As Stelios pointed out, as Daniel also pointed out, this is benefiting fringe groups on either side. I mean, has austerity worked in other countries? Is it going to work here?
I mean, I think this is a lesson that the German government has to learn, and I think they are on a slow path to accept it, that the German way of austerity can't be exported to other nations without adjustments and to take into account the individual situation in a country like Greece right now. But when it comes to overall stability, I think this is key for Germany as much as it is for Greece, and therefore the German government has zero interest in keeping this crisis alive. We are not benefiting from it, let's face it. The overall theme for the European Union and the Eurozone is uncertainty right now. We have the Greek crisis, which is a Eurozone crisis, a political crisis. We have other uncertainties lingering over the European Union or in the European Union, like the upcoming British referendum. We still have the crisis in Ukraine and Russia, which is a geopolitical crisis, and we have a refugee crisis on our southern borders. So overall, Europe is in total turmoil right now. And the last thing that everyone wants is that the Greek crisis continues. So we have to get back on a constructive path here.
Okay. Daniel, I want to get back to something that Annette mentioned earlier on, and that is what she called the lack of leadership from London and Paris. Where have the French and the British been in this crisis? Have they just taken a backseat, left it to Germany?
Well, two different situations. I think the United Kingdom obviously views itself really as an island when it comes to Europe, and Every few months, there is another announcement that the membership or the degree of membership in the EU will be put to a national vote. So I think that commitment to Europe is a little more fickle than it is on the continent. If you look at France, the strength of the government, in particular François Hollande, is not comparable to Angela Merkel. Merkel has been in power or in office for almost 10 years. France, a very different situation. There's a very good chance, it's certainly a reasonable chance, that the socialists will not govern in the next round, that they may not even make it out of the first round in an election in 2 years, and that it would be Sarkozy against Marine Le Pen facing off, and probably Sarkozy winning that. So you don't have that type of political stability anywhere else among the leading largest European countries as you have in Germany. So to some extent, that leadership role was also given to Germany. Now, I just want to comment on one more thing. I think, the conspiracy theories that Germany's behind the crisis and that it benefits from that, I think is obviously not conducive to resolving it. And to the extent there might be any benefit to Germany economically, it would be through a weak euro, which strengthens its exports. But I think at this point, anyone would agree that the cost of supporting failed economies has far surpassed the benefits to the economies from cheaper exports with a cheaper euro. So I think it's important to ratchet back the rhetoric, and if it shows anything, it's that the political union that will be necessary for this experiment to work in Europe is really far from being a reality. And one last point on the currency issue. The situation in Greece, of course, was exacerbated by the fact that Greece didn't have the option of devaluing its currency when the crisis hit, like a country like Iceland, which is not in the European Union, it's in the European Economic Area as an EFTA state. When it devalued it after the crisis in 2008, Iceland has recovered beautifully from that, and it was really on the bottom of the barrel relative to the size of its economy. So it is some food for thought whether the euro experiment really does work and is adequate to deal with these kinds of crises.
Right, Stelios, you've been very critical of Germany, but there's two things I want to ask you about. I mean, it might be very popular to blame Germany in Greece, but A, doesn't Greece have to put its own house in order? And the other is that, as you pointed out just a moment ago, the deal that Greece was forced to accept, you say, was worse than the deal that was on the table a few weeks ago. Who do you blame for that? Wasn't that Syriza's fault to reject that previous deal?
Well, first of all, the Greek government and Tsipras himself made enormous efforts to change the perception of Germany to Greeks. Tsipras publicly exonerated Merkel, saying she's a fine lady. She goes against, firing the famous cleaners. They were striking for months. He was very positive towards Merkel, and we tried our best. But at the end, what we have seen is that, Merkel and Schäuble were playing good cop, bad cop. So yes, at the end, the Greek government made a lot of mistakes, because, and the main mistake was that Tsipras himself, innocent enough, without experience, believed in what Mrs. Merkel was telling to him, that she's for a fair deal, she will try, she's not as Schäuble. That was her words, that she will try to have a better arrangement. And so Tsipras hoped that at the end she will keep her promises. That was not the case, and that's why the Greek government, of course, lost a lot of time. At the end, it was with the whole, it was completely without any other option, and at the end, it had to surrender. Of course, Greece has a lot of things to change, a lot of things. We want more than our partners to change things, but we need some time to do that. We cannot do in 5 months what the others did not, the allies of Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Schäuble did not do in 5 decades. But during those 5-6 months after the elections, we were under completely threats, paralysis. The economy is paralyzed, the institutions are paralyzed. There is no oil for the ambulances, teachers in the school, nurses. You cannot do reforms under those circumstances. It's like a war. How you can do that? We want to change things. We want good relations with Germany, but we need some help. You cannot find in a common currency with such imbalances between different countries. There must be mechanisms of, changing, limiting the imbalances, and this is not the case. we see the imbalances increasing instead of decreasing. That's the problem.
Okay, and as you pointed out, Germany we're facing two challenges here. On the one hand, keep unity in the European Union. On the other hand, implement the rules that everybody had agreed to. But there was a point, wasn't there, when Germany was prepared to see Greece leave, so-called Grexit?
Yeah, I mean, this issue came up just in the last weeks, and it was never defined by German Finance Minister Schäuble as a permanent exit. It was a temporary exit. And I think this was also, to a certain extent, a mistake in these debates, because Germany and Schäuble broke with the taboo. Until recently, the real strategy was to keep the club of the Eurozone together. And by allowing a country to leave, it can cause all sorts of, unprecedented, not only fiscal, but political consequences. And you have to be aware of this, what will happen when you take the genie out of the bottle. And I think the European Union, nor Germany, would be ready for that. And it was always Merkel's strategy for that reason, more for a political reason than a financial reason, to keep Greece in the Eurozone, just to avoid these unforeseeable consequences.
And that's where we have to leave it. We've run out of time. Thanks for joining us. Anat Hauser here with me in the studio, Stelios Kologlou in Athens, Daniel Levin with us from New York. Thanks to all of you for being with us.